Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this meeting and telling us what your work is. And I commend all of you and all your organisations actually for the great work you've done and do. I was just interested in asking maybe Claire and Mary to maybe elaborate on how disabled people access your services and how you identify or reach out to different employers or educators. And Craig, when you were talking there about the interview board and how they reacted to you, it just reminded me of a story that a woman told me recently about. She was telling me her son had just graduated with a master's in IT, and when she was inquiring with an organisation about work, they were very interested until she mentioned that her son was autistic, and suddenly they weren't so interested. So I think that brings us back to something you said, Mary, where you said that many of us have a limited understanding of disability because we've no connection, and how to address that. And I think a lot of you have mentioned inclusive education. So I'm very interested in how you envisage that, because I know parents are always nervous, especially when their child progresses from primary to secondary school, and then when their child has additional needs, that maybe even more nervous, and sometimes choose maybe rather than send to mainstream, they send to a special school. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Would you see inclusive education as being mainstream with a lot of additional supports for people with disabilities or people with Down syndrome? And I come from an educational background. I taught in a school, and the school I taught in had a lot of students with additional needs in it, so we had a very inclusive environment. But I know not all schools are like that. So just your thoughts on those. Thank you.
So just in terms of how people access our services from the Open Doors Initiative and the Towards Work project, it can be through referrals. So the Open Doors Initiative, we have a network of supporting partners ranging from different charities, national charities, so they may refer some of their participants, or what's happening more often than not, it's actually organic contact. Somebody might reach out specifically to us to ask for advice around reasonable accommodation, or they're going for an interview and they want some support, so we get in touch with them through that, or they access one of our online training sessions and attend there. That's where we start to build that network. In terms of employers, we have another project called Employers for Change. So this is a free information service for any employer, and it provides disability awareness training and information on if your hiring practices are inclusive, and to provide training for interview panels as well. And then just on the...
Are you going to mute?
No?
Yeah, sorry, yes, I think we dropped out for a moment.
Okay, no problem, sorry. I can't speak to the primary and second level question, as we work with people 17 and upwards, but so we'd focus on further education and third level. So I might, if that's okay, pass that question maybe to Mary or Rita, who might want to pick it up instead, who might be better fit to answer it.
Okay, within Down syndrome Ireland, now my own, I suppose, lived experiences. I have a daughter who's 32, and she started primary school back in 1995, and when she started, there was no such thing as an SNA or a resource teacher, so she started with just a baby infants teacher, the same as everybody else. And she was in first class before an SNA came, and it was 2 hours a day, and then second class before a resource teacher came, and she was divided between 5 schools in a rural area, so you can imagine how well that was divided out. But by the time she left primary school, she had the resources that made her life in school very good. And when we tried to move to secondary school, again, there was a huge fight and battle and wearing, grinding to get there. But we got there and we got the resources, and she went to secondary school. And parents of my generation, with loved ones with Down syndrome, we're very aware of the progress that has been made within education. You know, that people now go to school with children who have Down syndrome and children who have disabilities. And I have seen that and the richness that has brought to the lives of many people. And for us then, what happened is when our people turned 18, it fell off a cliff. And we see now that that's the new border, that's the new boundary. And in Kildare, like why we're so excited about our programmes is that we feel that you have to set a thing up in an environment to set it up for success, not set it up for failure. So you have to create the bespoke scaffolding around people that makes it succeed. So in our horticulture programme, we know these people. We know them, each one different from the other, and the variety and the spectrum of strengths and challenges that they have. So you have people in our horticulture programme who would sell snow to the Eskimos with people who don't speak at all. So you have to create the interaction that will allow those people to give of their best and to be recognised for their social role in society. And this is about education, but I see education as everything you learn that you didn't know the day before. Not something marked by a leaving cert or a junior cert. And I know all those things must be part of what we do. But that's how I see education. Everything that makes you richer from what you are. And for our people, then becomes the big challenge to hold on to what you've learned. Because our people have done very well in primary and secondary school. They have worked really hard, and their parents have worked really hard, and the school communities have worked really hard to get them to a level of literacy and numeracy and skills. And if they don't have the opportunity, real inclusive opportunities to use those skills, whether it be in further education, bespoke further education, or supported further education, or supported and bespoke employment opportunities, they will lose those skills. And loss of those skills is loss of independence, it is loss of, it will affect their mental health, and the amount of potential that will be lost to society is huge. So, like again, I say, when we look at our people, so for give you an example, yesterday, the group I work with in Donaghadee out in the polytunnel out in Donaghadee, we adopted the green kilometre along our walk. And if you go through any village or town in Ireland, any weekend, you will see people out with their high-vis vests collecting litter. And you will say to yourself, aren't they great people? Because they enhance our surroundings and our environment and our lives. They make a lovely contribution to our, to the quality of our life. Our people were out yesterday with their high-vis vests and their pickers and their whatever. And that's what people would have said. Aren't they great people? They wouldn't have said, aren't they people with Down syndrome? They would have said they're great people because they're making a valued social contribution. And that is education too. So that's why I think we have made huge progress in primary and secondary schools. I think we're just now at a new frontier, and we must push on that barrier again.
So my service is called Connect for Work, and it is a service primarily based for employers, but very much in support of the employee who is either in work at the moment but at risk of an absence because there's a challenge going on in their life, or they actually are already absent and are now trying to return back to their own job and their own work. So it's all about exploring reasonable accommodations, putting together a return to work plan to make sure that the person can return to their job in generally a gradual way, that it is supported, reasonable accommodations are explored. And if there are any grants that the employer can apply for in order to make that transition back, that application process is supported as well. So it generates employers who will contact me, but I sometimes do have individuals contacting me, and then we transfer then to working with the employer. So that's how I'm based in Galway, but it's I offer the service nationwide, and I have connected in with the Employers for Change service and Christabel there. So so linking in with different organisations and different supports as well. In answer to the question for education, I can't speak for education, but I do know from my experience of working with organisations, and as I referred to earlier on, when people don't have experience of disability, when it comes into their life, and that might come into their life via another person who has a disability, such as a work colleague or somebody that they are supporting or supervising, they don't know how to talk about disability. They may not understand that particular person's experience. Craig gave a very personal account of his experience. Unless you're living in that world where you have a disability, we as people outside that world, we don't understand it. So I think for people coming back into the workplace who have acquired a health condition, or there is a mental health challenge, or there's a physical disability, or whatever the reason for the absence is, it really is just so important for organisations to be open to exploring reasonable accommodations, asking the person, what is it you need? What can we do to help you to come back, to engage in conversations as early as possible and keep them connected with work so that people can return to work in a very safe, planned and sustainable way, so that they don't end up exiting the workforce and then being distanced from it and trying to get back into it, which, as Claire and others have mentioned, it's more difficult to get back into the workplace because you might have a job coach and then the employer is worried about, what does that mean? What does that mean for us? How can I support that? I don't know anything about that. I don't understand it. So that's where I'm coming from, is when you have inclusive education and children coming through classrooms where they experience disability, such as my children, they are in classes with lots of different capabilities, but they don't see those other students as being anything different. That's just the girls, that's just the boys in my class. They see it as being nothing different. So I know when they get into college and into working life, if they're placed in a position of having to support somebody, it's not going to be a huge thing, because they know how to ask questions of the people in their classrooms. Well, can I help you? What do you need from me? And they know how to do that. So that's why I think having mainstream education with lots more supports, that I think it was Reese, I think you might have mentioned it, that is really the way to go forward. When you have an inclusive education and everybody comes through the same system, they have a better understanding and know how to ask questions. So I hope that answers your question. I think it was Pauline Toddy who asked that question. Thank you.
Thank you very
Sometimes I feel that the participants in our programme are very fortunate because they have a lot of support networks within our own organisation. But every week somebody will contact my office from anywhere around the country, and it'll be people with very different disabilities and impairments. And I think there's a couple of pinch points. One of them is when people who have attended mainstream schools and they leave mainstream schools and they go into college and they start some courses and, they don't work out or they don't fit in, or they find that transition piece of going to college, leaving home, trying to find a new support network. And maybe their social skills, just don't back them up in the way that everybody else has that opportunity. And often you find people are falling out of courses and are going back home, and they're not quite sure about their options and their choices. And the other pinch point I'm coming across, I had a call even yesterday from a third level student, somebody who's gone through exams, accountancy exams, and, not being supported by the employer to complete exams. And also, there's no support for that person out there trying to move into employment. So I think a lot more needs to be done in this area in some form of transition support. As I said, I feel sometimes, I have parents coming back to me, their children have gone through the mainstream system and they're coming back and saying, I wonder, is there any possibility we can access ability work or co-foundation services? And, that's sad because, people should be able to get the same services in mainstream as what we offer. Thank you.